We sat here in this chamber last night. The President of the United States did what you do in a campaign speech, not in the State of the Union. He did what you do when you have a failed agenda and you want to try to scare the American people rather than inspire the American people. Accuse your opponents of being against Social Security and Medicare with no real backing, but offering no solutions himself to the very problems articulated by the gentleman from Arizona. Did anybody hear the President of the United States last night address at all the reality that Social Security and Medicare are on a path to bankruptcy in terms of their funding relative to the demands to pay benefits? Of course not. Of course not, because the President of the United States, Joe Biden, has zero solutions to the problems facing this country. Not one. Not one solution last night was offered. Standing at the well where the Speaker currently sits, not one solution was offered. Instead, it was a campaign speech. And the fact is, the American people, I think, saw through it. Because in the same speech that the president attacked Republicans for not having a solution for Social Security and Medicare, that accusing Republicans of saying we were going to walk away from the obligations for Social Security and Medicare, the president offered no solutions on the border. None. The president said not a word about our men and women in uniform. The president referenced Ukraine, but didn't provide an actual strategy or desired outcome besides Putin bad, Ukraine good. Look, the fact of the matter is, the entire nation is tired of exactly what we saw last night. Tired of it. The president came in and tried to offer populist rhetoric, frankly, stealing some of the rhetoric almost directly from President Trump. He tried to offer some old school Democrat rhetoric, saying, we've got a program for everybody in America. Don't worry, we're going to pay for it. I gave a speech on the floor of the House about a year ago entitled The United States House of Free Stuff, about this body. When a number of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle came down and talked about all of the student loans that would be forgiven, all of the spending that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle would offer, with no indication of how it would be paid for. Because why would you do that? Look, the fact of the matter is, this body, the People's House, is never going to be serious about representing the people until we stop spending money we don't have, stop allowing for the printing of money to carry out the very things the American people sent us here to stop doing, stop funding the very bureaucracy that are carrying out the actions that we decry in our own campaigns. We're never going to get this country on track until we stop printing money, borrowing money, and spending money we don't have. I would defy any one of my colleagues, anyone, this side of the aisle or the other side of the aisle, to come prove that statement wrong. And when we're $32 trillion in debt, or almost, and we keep having a debate about who's going to spend more money on which program of our choice, how is that going to save the country? With all due respect to colleagues on my side of the aisle, I've heard numerous Republicans say, we are not going to touch defense spending. Okay. Good for you. Maybe I agree. Maybe we shouldn't touch defense spending. Maybe we need more defense spending to beat China. But then what, pray tell, is your solution to fund it? I promise you, and my request, all my Republican colleagues out there, come on down. If you're the ones saying you will not touch defense spending, you come down here and you give me a solution. Don't hide behind the men and women in uniform. Don't go, oh no, we're not going to touch defense spending. We need more defense spending. We need to beat China. I might agree with you, but I'm not going to sell printing and borrowing money that undermines the very national security that you're going out and talking about. To my Democrat colleagues, you come down here, don't say a word about how you're going to spend or pay for any of the spending, any of the programs that you stand up and applauded last night when the President of the United States is talking about it. You say you want to have non-defense spending. You want to have more funding for HUD, more funding for HHS, more funding for programs, more funding for some COP grants or whatever it is. It wouldn't be for COP grants. But you want this more funding. How are you going to pay for it? The answer is no one is going to come down here and give an answer to that. With the possible exception of two things. My Democratic colleagues will come down and say taxes. Okay, why don't you come down? Let's have a conversation about taxes. Come down and show me what taxes you want to raise that will not cause economic impact such that our revenues actually go down. Come show that to me. Let's have a debate about that. My colleagues on this side of the aisle will tend to say, well, it's the mandatory spending. Don't you understand? Don't worry about discretionary spending. That's small ball. Well, a third of our budget is discretionary spending still, so I'm not sure that's small ball. I mean, it is, after all, like $6 trillion. I don't consider that small ball. And my colleagues aren't incorrect that we've got to deal with mandatory spending. But you can't hide behind mandatory spending to say that's the problem, while you then say, well, we got to increase defense spending. And well, I don't know that I would increase all that other non-defense spending, all those agencies. But you know what? That's what my Democrat colleagues want. So the only way I can get my defense spending is to agree to what they want. And one day we'll deal with mandatory spending. So what the hell? $32 trillion of debt and counting. But that's exactly what happens. And again, to any of my colleagues, come down here and prove me wrong. Come on down. I'm here. Come debate me. American people actually want to have a debate. Maybe we should have that debate every day, all day, until we come to some conclusion about how we're going to stop doing the same thing over and over again. Stop spending money we don't have. Now, I'll tell you my solution. I actually believe you should come to the floor and come here to debate and have solutions. I believe that the bureaucracy of the federal government is plenty big. I don't believe it needs to get any bigger. I actually, and this, call me crazy, I think maybe returning the bureaucratic state, the administrative state, the bureaucracy, the federal government bureaucracy, returning it to pre-COVID levels. I'm not asking for that much. I'm just saying, let's go back to the size of the bureaucracy before COVID spending blew the spending out of the water. That would be 2019 spending levels. You with me? Let's just take the bureaucracy and take it back to pre-COVID spending levels. Now, do that, hold defense spending at 2023 levels that were just passed, that all the hawks were running around going, all right, we got more money for defense. We got a 10% increase in defense. Okay. Let's hold that spending. if you do what I just said, freeze the bureaucracy at 2019 levels, freeze defense spending at 2023 levels, one we just passed. If you do that, and you do that for 10 years, freeze that number for 10 years, you'll save $3.6 trillion and reduce our deficit spending. You get about, I don't know, probably about a third of the way towards balancing the budget in 10 years. I think that's a pretty good start. Does anybody in America want to raise their hand and say that the bureaucracy, the federal bureaucracy, in 2019 was too small? Anybody who wants to come down and say that the size of the federal government, the non-defense federal government, in 2019, man, that government, oh my gosh, it was so small. There were no bureaucrats interfering with my life. There were no regulations cutting off economic activity. Again, I defy, come on down. Tell me how that government of 2019, just a few years ago, was so efficient, so great, such a good size that you think that's the right size. And we need it actually to be bigger. That it's not the right size, that we need it to be bigger. I don't know many Americans. If I go to my district that I represent, 750,000 Texans, I don't know many of them that would raise their hand and go, oh, please, I need that bureaucracy to be bigger. Hire more federal workers into all of those programs. Fill up more buildings in Washington, D.C. We need more of that. Now, defense spending. Well, we just got defense spending increased a bit here to 23. Well, you say, well, do we need more spending for defense? There's a lot of people who might say we might. Why? Well, is our Navy what it needs to be beat China? Do we have all of the latest technology we need to be able to beat China or another world foe? Do we have all of the latest and greatest intel? Do we have all of the personnel trained properly at the levels we need to ensure that we can be the finest fighting force in the world and that we can, kill people and blow things up when necessary? Because that's what, our military is supposed to do. We might need more spending. I'll grant that. So I'll tell you what. Take my plan of freezing the federal bureaucracy, non-defense, take last year's defense levels at 23, now increase it 2.5% a year for the next 10 years. Well, instead of saving $3.6 trillion, we would save $3 trillion. Still a pretty good step towards 10-year balance. Now that's one idea. I think it's the right idea. I'll tell you why I think it's the right idea. I don't know why I want to give more money to an EPA that puts Joe Robertson in jail because he had water on his land and somehow that violated the waters of the United States laws. I don't want to give more money to the bureaucrats at the Federal Bureau of Investigation to build a new $400 million facility in Maryland like we just voted through in December, to hire more FBI agents, to put more people like Scott Smith, a dad in Loudoun County, on a list to be a domestic terrorist because he dared to go to a school board and challenge a school board for not doing enough to protect his daughter. Scott Smith joined me in this chamber last night and sat right up there, listening to the bloviating nonsense we heard coming from the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue, sitting here last night. I don't want to give more money to those bureaucrats. I don't mind saying it. I was a federal prosecutor for a couple of years. The Department of Justice has plenty that it can cut. And all I'm talking about is going back to 2019 levels. Do we want to fund an NIH further or an FDA or CDC further to carry out more gain-of-function research? Anybody raise your hand? Raise your hand if you want more gain-of-function research coming out of your federal labs, maybe even working with China to do it. Anybody sign up and say, yep, that's a great idea. Good use of money. Well done. Anybody want more of that? More of those programs? Again, with borrowed, printed money. How about you want more money to go to the Department of Labor to shut down, for example, Riolana Reiner's children's clothing consignment company? Because she violated some standards according to the Department of Labor? How about more money for the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms to issue by regulation, not a law that we passed, to issue by regulation a barring of pistol stabilizing braces that potentially make felons out of, 10 million or more Americans? Does anybody want to give the ATF more money to go after and target the American people? But that's what we do here. And with all due respect to my Republican colleagues who like to go take shots at my Democrat colleagues, for a lot of good reason, by the way, it's not enough to campaign against this stuff and then come here and fund it. But that's what we do. We campaign against these terrible regulations and these terrible actions by bureaucrats. IRS going after nonprofits and faith-based organizations because of their beliefs. The FBI targeting Mark Houck, a dad, an FBI showing up at 7 a.m. in the morning with a SWAT team to go after his family in Philadelphia because he dared to defend his son when they were outside of an abortion clinic, engaging in their First Amendment right to stand up in defense of life. Oh yeah, but let's go give some more money to them. But that's what we'll do. Let's give more money to that bureaucracy. The woke, weaponized, wasteful bureaucracy at war with the American people, targeting the American people. The truth is, we have an obligation to reduce federal spending, even if it were filled with nothing but angels doing nothing but angelic things, because we're spending money we don't have. But the truth is, that bureaucracy is doing anything but those angelic things. So why do we continue to fund it? The funding that we continue to provide for a bureaucracy that not only is at odds with and targeting the American people, targeting the Scott Smiths, targeting the Mark Houcks, targeting the Joe Robertsons for having water on his land, targeting Marvin Horn for his raisin crop, fining him $685,000 because he didn't comply with certain New Deal era restrictions that the Department of Agriculture put on him. Think about that. I'm not saying that I can say every single thing, that every example you bring up, that someone didn't violate some reg or some rule, because who the hell knows how many there are? I've asked. No one can tell me. How many federal laws are there? Again, if any of my colleagues can come here down here to the floor and bring me a footnoted site and say this is how many federal laws there are, I would love to see it. Come tell me how many regulations there are with laws and crimes attached to it. According to one report I saw, there's an estimated 4,500 federal laws, statutes, crimes, I say criminal statutes, sorry, not laws, criminal statutes, and some 300,000 crimes attached to regulations. That's just one report that I saw. The Department of Justice apparently tried to calculate this in the early 1980s and they gave up. They came up with a certain number and they just kind of stopped. How can any American engage in activity and not essentially be violating something somewhere where some eager bureaucrat is just able to go, nope, you're in violation, you're shut down? We were sitting up in the Rules Committee the other day talking about vaccine mandates. And one of the witnesses testified, and one of my colleagues said, well, why aren't you taking this end to the public health emergency or this end to this vaccine mandate through regular order? Look, I'm a big supporter of regular order. I think we should take things through committees, bring them to the floor, offer amendments. Let's keep in mind this is a one-page bill that's pretty straightforward. And I'll just say this. What was the regular order carried out by the executive branch in just unilaterally executing an order to force vaccines upon private citizens through OSHA requirements? Shut down by the courts, by the way. Where was the regular order? Where was the sort of equivalent to due process for the American people, where we could at least go through and make some good decisions? For the executive branch, when they said, yeah, you military guys, you got to get this COVID vaccine. Based on what? Well, Anthony Fauci said so. Rachel Walensky said so. Well, wait. Well, but didn't CDC Director Walensky say that the vaccines don't do anything for transmission? Yeah, well, don't mind that. We'll just keep mandating needles get stuck in the arm for our men and women in uniform, notwithstanding some of the concerns of myocarditis among the young, healthy population that predominantly make up our military, by the way. Last night, my friend Senator Cruz was sitting right over here last night during the State of the Union, brought a young man, a member of our military, who's been kicked off the career track. They're coming after him to come get $75,000 of money from schooling. Coming after him. He's got to write that check or they're going to keep coming after him. They're not fired him because of the bill that we passed in December saying, well, we're not going to allow you to remove members of the military if they don't want to take the vaccine. But he's still being punished right now. A patriot who signed up to serve his country has his government going after him for money that he's got in for his family after his sacrifices to serve the country. They're going after him. His government is going after him when all he wanted to do was serve his country and not stick a needle in his arm because some bureaucrat said so. Let me be perfectly clear to my colleagues on both sides of the aisle. This is going to change. We're not going to do this. We're not going to allow the government to do this to the American people. And I mean that. When we fund the government this year, things better change, Mr. President. You come down here and you make threats to us about what you think is going to happen with respect to default. You come down here and lecture us in the people's house. Well, let me tell you, Mr. President, we're a co-equal branch of government. And we're not going to allow the American people to continue to be targeted by the very government that is supposed to protect them, that is supposed to do their constitutional duty, that is supposed to secure the border of the United States, that is supposed to stop fentanyl from coming in, that is supposed to have operational control of the border so that neither Americans nor migrants are dying, that is supposed to stop dangerous cartels, that is supposed to stand up to China, that is supposed to have a strong military, sparingly used but not woke. We're not supposed to spend money we don't have. We're supposed to balance our budget. We're supposed to defend the American people. And I'm not going to agree, sitting in the Rules Committee or on this floor, to continue the process of spending money we don't have, of not changing the status quo and not demanding that the President of the United States act like it act like he's the president, defend this country, secure our border. He doesn't get to come down here and lecture us. The People's House decides how dollars get spent. The People's House represents the people. We need a reckoning. We need to actually stand up and fight, stand up and be counted. I'm not going to go around the circles that we constantly go around in this place, having another meeting about another meeting about another meeting. How about we just stand up for something? How about people be on the floor of this body debating? Get another hour of special orders, another half hour of special orders. I'm sick and tired of watching Texans that I represent die from fentanyl. I'm sick and tired of watching my fellow Texans in the state legislature debating right now, spending more Texas taxpayer money to do the job the federal government is supposed to do and secure the border. I'm sick and tired of walking around on eggshells around a body comprised of members of both sides of the aisle that refuse to do their job, to stop spending money we don't have, and say, oh, well, what political poll-tested 80% issue can we put out there and go to the American people with so that we can sound reasonable in our demands? How about you just demand what's right? Why don't we just stand up and say, you know what, we're going to balance our budget. Giddy up. That's what every American does. It's what every business has to do. But no, we'll keep going around in circles, each side going to their pet projects. Meanwhile, the federal bureaucracy is going to continue to be at war with the American people, like my friend Scott Smith, who was here last night. Not one single mention by the president. Hadn't apologized a lick for putting him through that. Domestic terrorist. Hadn't apologized a lick for the fact that his Secretary of Homeland Security, who was here last night, stood up at a lectern and said that his own Border Patrol employees that worked for him whipped Haitian migrants when he knew full well, both from the video evidence that we all saw with our eyes and a memo from his own people in Department of Homeland Security, that was not true. He knew it. And then he blamed it on systemic racism. Has he apologized? No. And the reason he hasn't apologized is because he's at war with the people of the United States and the fact that his job is supposed to be to secure the border, and the president knows it. President goes down and does a photo op with a preset visit in El Paso where they literally go out and clean out the streets of the migrants who are piling up in El Paso and sets up a photo op. And then last night dares to come down here, lecture us, lie to the American people that we're trying to go after their Social Security and Medicare, and offer nothing about his constitutional duty as President of the United States to secure the border. Mr. Speaker, I will yield back here in a minute. I assume my time is running short. I'll just close by saying this. The American people expect more out of the People's House. They expect more out of the President of the United States than what we saw last night. It was not a State of the Union. It was a state of confusion. We have an obligation to do our job and stop spending money we don't have, secure the border of the United States, and actually represent the people. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.